stood at the entrance to the Pinecrest Estates clubhouse. Security didn't check me in. They told me to wait in the foyer until someone confirms you. I wasn't just late. I was being filtered through the crack in the door. I watched my neighbors laugh with guests, saying, "She always runs behind." I was perfectly on time. Someone had altered my invitation. Then the HOA board chair stepped out. He saw me and went absolutely still. It wasn't my dress. It was the cream-colored envelope in my hand. "My name is Lila Voss." The Uber's tires crunched on the manicured gravel of the Pinecrest Estates clubhouse. A sound that was supposed to signal arrival, but felt to me like a warning. Pinecrest Valley spread out below, a tapestry of late autumn gold and deep green. But its beauty felt distant, like a painting behind glass. I paid the driver. My movements measured and calm, a stark contrast to the tightening knot in my stomach. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and chlorine from the community pool that everyone paid extra dues for. It was the kind of air that should have been welcoming. The clubhouse's grand oak doors were propped open, revealing a foyer that glowed with the warmth of 100 string lights and the soft murmur of polite suburban society. I smoothed down the front of my olive silk dress, a color chosen for its understated elegance, for its ability to blend in a futile hope, as it turned out. At a polished mahogany lectern just inside the entrance, a young woman with a professionally serene smile and a tablet stood guard. "Welcome to the Pinecrest Estates annual community gala," she chirped, her eyes scanning me with practiced efficiency. "Name, please." "Lila Voss." Her stylist tapped on the screen. Her smile didn't falter, but it lost its light. It became a mask. "Voss," she repeated, scrolling. Her finger stopped. "Ah, yes, I have you right here." She turned the tablet slightly away, a gesture meant to be subtle, but was as glaring as a spotlight. I caught a glimpse of my name, and next to it, highlighted in a pale, sickly yellow, were the words, "Handle later. Await confirmation." "There seems to be a small logistical query with your seating," she said, her voice a smooth corporate apology. "If you could just wait for a moment, we'll have it sorted out." She gestured towards the glass-walled corridor to the left, a space designed to showcase the estate's rolling gardens, but which now felt like a holding pen. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my clutch. A notification from the Pinecrest residents group chat, a name dripping with irony. I could no longer taste the sarcasm. My neighbor Belle had posted a photo. It was a wide shot of the ballroom, tables draped in ivory linen, set with gleaming silver and towering floral arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus. The caption read, "It's all so perfect. Every detail." My eyes scanned the photo, zooming in on the calligraphed place cards at the head table, then the surrounding tables. Table 1, Table 2, Table 3. No Lila. I wasn't just unseated. I was absent, erased before I had even arrived. A second vibration. This time, an Instagram notification. Regina Caldwell just added to her story. I tapped it open. It was a boomerang of her, champagne flute in hand, winking at the camera. The light caught the diamonds on her neck. A gift from the board, no doubt. Text overlaid the video in delicate script. "Positive energy only tonight." And beside it, a single, carefully chosen emoji, a diamond, brilliant, hard, and meant to cut. It was a message aimed with surgical precision. The receptionist was studiously ignoring me, her attention fixed on a new couple swanning through the doors. I stepped back, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. I pulled my invitation from my clutch. The cardstock was thick, expensive, the edges gilded in gold. My name was written in the same elegant script as the place cards I couldn't find. And there, beneath the details of the venue, was the time. Ceremony begins at 7 o'clock. My watch read 6:40 p.m. I wasn't late. I was 40 minutes early. A cold certainty washed over me. This wasn't a mistake. This was architecture. Every detail from the note on the tablet to the time on this card was a carefully laid brick in a wall built to keep me out. A man in a black suit with an earpiece materialized at my side. He wasn't smiling. "Ma'am, we do need to keep the entryway clear. If you could please wait in the corridor." It wasn't a request. I nodded, the motion stiff, and walked into the glass hallway. The murmur of the partygoers in the main hall became muted. The sounds of their laughter and conversation distorted through the thick panes. I was on display. Guests, the real guests, drifted past on their way to the champagne reception. They were the Pinecrest elite, old money and new, their faces familiar from block parties and the monthly violation notices. They glanced at me, a woman in a formal dress standing alone in a hallway, and their expressions shifted from mild curiosity to a swift, dismissive categorization. I was not one of them. I was a problem, a vendor, a rule breaker. Their eyes slid away. The humiliation was a physical thing, a prickling heat on my skin. Through the glass, I could see a large, elegantly framed poster on an easel detailing the evening's events. At the bottom, in flowing script, it read, "Champagne generously sponsored by the Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund, under President Regina Caldwell." A reminder that this was her territory, her world. Regina was the queen of the Gala, and I was being treated like an intruder on her turf. Then I saw her, my former ally on the board, Elaine, gliding through the crowd, a vision in pale blue chiffon. She was talking to another guest, her hands gesturing gracefully, a socialite in her natural habitat. Our eyes met through the glass. For a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of panic in her gaze, a silent, desperate plea. "Don't, Lila, don't make a scene." Then she turned away, laughing at something the other woman said. Her shoulders angled just so, creating a physical barrier. She pretended to be absorbed, suddenly too busy to see her own neighbor standing in a glass cage 10 feet away. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. My phone buzzed again, this time with a private message. It was from Lydia, my one remaining friend in the neighborhood, the only one who still saw through the HOA's polished facade. "Regina is setting you up." I heard her on the phone with the event planner. "She told them your arrival time was 8 o'clock and to manage the situation if you showed up earlier. This is a performance. Lila, you're the villain in her story tonight." I read the message twice. You're the villain in her story. It was so perfectly timed. She didn't just want to win. She needed an audience to watch her opponent lose. My fingers tightened around the object in my clutch, the one thing I had brought that wasn't a gift. The cream-colored envelope was cool and smooth against my clammy skin. Its edges were sharp, precise. Inside, nestled in its folds, were legal documents, photocopied, notarized papers detailing the original charter and a recent questionable amendment to the Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund. The fund the previous president had established to ensure fair resident grants and improvements. The fund that was supposed to pay for my solar panel community project before the money had mysteriously been reallocated. The security guard shifted his weight, his gaze lingering on me. The guests continued to float past, their laughter a faint, mocking echo. Elaine was now out of sight, swallowed by the glittering crowd. Regina was somewhere in the heart of it all, playing the radiant president, the benevolent star of a drama she had scripted herself. They thought they had locked me out. They thought they had control of the narrative. But the truth was, I hadn't even walked through the door yet. I stood there in the cold, bright hallway, an unwelcome guest with a story of my own, waiting for my cue, and in my hand, I held the script. A full 20 minutes passed. 20 minutes of being a statue in a glass hallway, analyzed by every passing guest. Finally, The same tight-smiled receptionist. The one I now knew was operating under direct orders. Approached me. "Miss Voss," she said, her voice dripping with false empathy. "Thank you so much for your patience. We found the perfect spot for you. If you'll just follow me." She didn't lead me toward the front, where the round tables were clustered in warm candlelit pools of conversation. Neighbors mingling, the air thick with perfume and the scent of expensive catering. She led me past the gleaming white dance floor, past the seven-tiered cake monstrosity, and toward the back where the light was dimmer and the laughter thinner. She stopped at a table nestled so far in the corner that it was almost in a different zip code. Table 17. It was adjacent to a set of swinging silver doors, the kind that led to the kitchen. Every few seconds, the doors would burst open with a pneumatic hiss thump, revealing a glimpse of harsh fluorescent lighting and the frantic energy of the catering staff. A busing station, partially hidden by a black screen, was just 5 feet away. The ambient sound here wasn't the string quartet. It was the sharp metallic clatter of discarded cutlery being thrown into bins and the intermittent growl of a commercial dishwasher. The other occupants of table 17 looked just as surprised to be there as I was. A great uncle I hadn't seen in a decade, who seemed to have fallen asleep. A former board member dropped after a bad vote, and a young couple I didn't recognize at all who looked like they'd won a radio contest to be here. This was not a table. This was an archive of social loose ends. "Enjoy the evening," the receptionist chirped, already turning, abandoning me in Siberia. I sat. The chair was cold. I placed my clutch on my lap, the cream envelope within feeling like a block of ice. I nodded to my table mates, who offered weak, sympathetic smiles. They knew. We all knew. We were the exiles. The sound of a spoon tapping against a champagne flute cut through the din. Clink, clink, clink. The MC, a man with a voice too smooth for his rented tuxedo, stepped up to the microphone. All right. Can I have everyone's attention?" he boomed. The room quieted. "Let's give a huge Pinecrest welcome to the families that made this magical night happen. We want to thank our incredible board members, especially President Regina Caldwell." Applause. "And of course, the wonderful sponsors who keep our community standards shining." More applause. Regina waved, beaming, her gaze fixed on the head table. The MC continued, "A special shout-out to our vice president, who looks stunning." He went on listing the board members, the committee chairs. He even thanked the event planner by name. My name was never spoken. It was as if I didn't exist. The omission was so precise, so absolute. Felt like a physical slap. The great uncle snorted in his sleep. Dinner service began. We at table 17 were served last. The kitchen doors hissed and thumped. Then another clink. Clink, clink. Regina stood up, a vision in white lace and pearls, her smile so bright it looked weaponized. Her husband stood beside her, his hand possessively on the small of her back. "Oh my gosh! Thank you everyone for coming," Regina gushed, her voice resonant, her eyes scanning the room, and for a moment I saw her glee as they landed on me, sitting in the shadows next to the dish station. And I have to give a special shout-out to my neighbor Lila Voss. The spotlight found me. I felt the heat of it, the sudden intense focus of 200 pairs of eyes. She even managed to pull herself away from her little data consulting gig for one night. Regina continued, her tone playful, but the words laced with acid. "We were so worried she wouldn't make it. She's just so dedicated. My super workaholic neighbor who always has time to file complaints. We love you." The head table laughed. The rest of the room offered a hesitant, awkward ripple of applause. They were laughing at me, not with me. I was the caricature, the joyless, rule-obsessed neighbor. The punchline. I raised my glass of water, my smile a perfect serene mask. The spotlight clicked off. leaving me in the darkness again, my retinas burning. Her husband made his obligatory rounds. He was handsome in a bland old-money way, his jaw tight, his suit perfect. He eventually arrived at table 17. He nodded at the sleeping uncle, shook the ex-board member's hand, then he turned to me. "Lila," he said, the name sounding foreign in his mouth. "Glad you got in." "Was Regina worried?" I asked, my voice even. "Yes." Well, he didn't meet my gaze. He stood slightly angled away from me. A subtle physical distancing. He was already a Caldwell, and I was a Pinecrest liability. "Enjoy the dinner." He moved on, leaving a cold draft in his wake. A moment later, a more formidable presence arrived. Eleanor Pierce, the board treasurer. She was draped in navy blue silk and diamonds that looked ancestral. She moved with the unnerving stillness of someone who had never been told no. Her eyes were a pale, assessing blue. "You must be Lila," she said. It wasn't a question. "Regina has told me so much about you." The words hung in the air, polite threat. Her gaze drifted from my face down to my dress and lingered. "That's an interesting color choice." "Olive." "It's silk," I said simply. "Yes," she mused as if inspecting a piece of upholstery. "Have you ever tried something lighter?" "Dear, pastels, you have the complexion for them. It's just the shade. It's very severe." She smiled, a small tight compression of her lips, and glided away, having delivered her verdict. "You do not belong." The final cut came during the salad course. A hyperactive photographer with 2 cameras bouncing on his chest bounded into the center of the room. "Okay, people, I need board members." Happy couple, no. The president and her inner circle. Parents of the community right here. Elaine and the board chair joined the group. Regina waved her hand. "No. No immediate board first." I instinctively stood up, moving toward the group. I was supposed to be part of the core group for the grant photo. The photographer saw me approaching and held up a hand, his face a mask of professional panic. "Oh, ma'am. Sorry. I just need the inner circle for this shot." The core group. The clatter from the kitchen seemed to fade. The music dipped. I stopped walking. "I am on the grant committee," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden lull. The photographer looked at Regina, who gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Right," he said, turning back to me, flustered. "Sorry." Regina said she wanted just the president and sponsors for this one. For the album. "We'll get a neighbor shot later. Promise. If you could just step back." He gestured for me to move out of the frame. I stepped back. I watched as Regina, the board chair, and the inner circle posed with her chosen allies. Smiling, perfect, unbroken unit. The flash popped, immortalizing the moment. The moment I was officially, publicly exiled. I turned and walked away. I didn't go back to table 17. I pushed open a glass door and stepped out into the night onto a stone terrace overlooking the estate's rose garden. The air was cold and clean, and it stung my lungs. The muffled sound of the party was a dull throb behind me. I just needed a single second to let the cold fury settle. I heard the click-clack of heels on the stone behind me and tensed, expecting Elaine's belated, whispered apology, but it was the event planner. She was holding her binder and tablet, her face pinched with stress. She didn't see me in the shadows. As she fumbled with the door handle, the heavy binder slipped from her grasp. It hit the flagstones with a thwack and a cascade of papers scattered across the terrace, skittering in the breeze. "Oh, shoot," she hissed, almost on autopilot. I stepped forward to help. "Here," I said. She jumped, startled. "Oh, Miss Voss, thank you." I bent down, gathering the loose sheets, vendor contacts, timelines, invoices, and then I saw it. A single page, illuminated by the light spilling from the doorway. It was a seating chart. At the top, in bold letters, it read seating chart, draft V3, final. My eyes moved instantly, scanning the map. Table 1, Table 2. And there at Table 2, nestled between the board chair and the treasurer, was my name, Lila Voss. I held the paper. The planner saw what I was looking at. Her face went pale. She lunged and snatched the sheet from my hand. "Oh, thank you," she stammered, stuffing it back into the binder. That's just an old version. A draft. So confusing. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I see," I said. She practically fled back inside, the glass door closing with a soft sigh. So, I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't a logistical error. I was a target. My seat at Table 2 had been deliberately, and at the last minute, swapped for Table 17. This entire night was a calculated campaign. I stayed in the garden, the cold seeping into my dress. From the other side of a tall trellis, I heard laughter, the high, shrill sound of Regina's inner circle. "Seriously, did you see Lila's face when the photographer kicked her out? That was pure gold." One of them whispered gleefully. "Absolutely savage," said another, the voice I recognized as the vice president's. "But just wait for the Community Spirit Award presentation. Regina is going to aim right at her. She told me it's going to be so pricelessly awkward. Always the complainer, never the hero shot. The videographer is all set up for the close-up." A cold, hard clarity settled over me. This was the game. They're not very good at whispering. The voice was male, deep, and calm. It came from the shadows under a large bamboo overhang I hadn't noticed. I turned, startled, my hand instinctively going to the clutch on my lap. A man stepped into the moonlight. He wasn't in a tuxedo, but a perfectly tailored dark suit. He was holding a rocks glass with a single large cube of ice. He wasn't smiling, just observing me with a quiet, unnerving intelligence. I started, my voice tight. "I'm Marcus Hale," he said, cutting me off gently. "I manage the Valley Community Fund." He didn't offer pity. He offered a fact. "I've been watching them isolate you since you were in the hallway. That performance with the photographer, the table by the kitchen. It's clumsy but effective." He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "You looked like you needed some air." "I am fine," I lied. Marcus nodded as if accepting the lie for what it was, a necessary piece of armor. "I'm sure you are," he said. "But you look like you could use an alliance more than a rescue." He gestured with his glass back toward the reception hall, the den of glittering lions. "They're about to present the awards. The humiliation rituals are escalating." He looked at me, a direct, unfiltered assessment. "I'm at Table 3. There's an empty chair. Come with me." My breath plumed in the cold air, a small white ghost in the darkness. I looked at Marcus Hale. He hadn't offered pity, a handkerchief, or a platitude. He had offered an asset: visibility. "Alliance," he'd said, "not rescue." This was a language I understood. I nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. The decision clicked into place like the latch on a briefcase. "Table 3, I said. "Lead the way." He didn't just walk beside me. He offered his arm. I took it. The gesture felt formal, almost archaic, and that was its power. It wasn't a date. It was a presentation. It wasn't comfort. It was a statement. We pushed through the heavy glass doors. The warmth of the reception hall hit me again. But this time, I wasn't the one who was cold. The string quartet had given way to a low-tempo jazz ensemble. The saxophone a velvety murmur. The hiss thump of the kitchen doors at Table 17, my designated shame corner, faded into the background, replaced by the civilized clink of crystal. The perspective of the room, My subjective angle flipped 180 degrees. Before I was an anomaly under harsh fluorescent light, a specimen in a glass hallway. Now, walking on the arm of Marcus Hale, a man who radiated the quiet, indisputable authority of old money and new purpose, I was part of the landscape. Heads turned, not abruptly, but in slow, curious arcs. The conversations didn't stop, but they dipped in volume, a subtle whoosh, as the social oxygen was recalibrated. Eyes that had slid off me in the hallway, dismissing me as staff or a +1 gone astray, now lingered. They held a new, uncertain respect. They weren't looking at the girl by the busing station. They were looking at Marcus Hale's companion. I could feel the cognitive dissonance rippling through the crowd. This didn't fit the script. The outcast was back and she wasn't hiding. My gaze found the head table. Regina was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand on her husband's shoulder. She saw us. Her laugh didn't die. It froze. It hung in the air for a brittle second, artificial and sharp-edged. Her eyes, so bright and celebratory moments before, narrowed. The lonely complainer narrative she had spent the entire evening, and weeks before, carefully constructing, had just developed a massive structural flaw. I saw the flash of panic quickly papered over with a tight smile. Her husband looked too, his expression one of pure confusion. Marcus didn't lead me straight to his table. He steered me with deliberate, unhurried steps toward a small, powerful cluster of people standing near the dance floor. The center of this group was a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair cut in a severe, elegant bob. She wore no diamonds, only a complex heavy silver necklace that looked like a piece of wearable sculpture. She commanded the space around her effortlessly. "Marcus," she said, her voice like dry gin. "Mrs. Whitlow," Marcus said, his voice imbued with a warmth I hadn't heard before. "A pleasure to see you here. I didn't realize you knew the Caldwells." "I know the fund," she said dismissively. Then her eyes moved to me. They were intensely assessing. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Mrs. Whitlow, I'd like you to meet Lila Voss. Lila is the director of strategy at Northstar Metrics." He didn't say, "This is the rule breaker." He didn't say, "This is Lila." He defined me by my profession, by my strength. He had handed me the stage. Mrs. Whitlow's focus sharpened. This was not the introduction she expected for a guest at this particular gala. "Northstar," she said, the name sounding crisp. "The data group out of Seattle. You're with them." "The same," I said. My voice was steady. The cold from the terrace was gone, replaced by a focused, clean energy. The anxiety had evaporated, leaving behind a hard, bright anger that I could now use as fuel. "Your humanizing data campaign was fascinating," she said, cutting straight to the point. There was no small talk in this woman. "You repurposed demographic segmentation into narrative modeling." It was bold. This was my territory. This was my language. I felt my posture straighten. "Thank you." We found that empathy scales. Most companies were targeting consumers or users and they were failing. We convinced them to talk to people. We didn't change the data. We changed the language around the data. It stabilized their customer base by 18% in 2 quarters. A man beside her, who had been listening intently, nodded. Mrs. Whitlow herself gave a single curt nod of approval. "Impressive. My fund, the Silverline Fund, is heavily invested in Pinecrest's community outreach programs. We're currently struggling with our messaging. Our impact isn't translating into donor engagement." "You're funding the impact, but you're not funding the story," I said, the words coming quickly, cleanly. She smiled. It was a real, thin smile that reached her eyes. "Exactly. Marcus, you always find the most interesting people." She turned her full attention back to me, effectively dismissing everyone else in her circle. "We should talk, Miss Voss, when you're not occupied." She gestured to the gala around us as if it were a minor distraction. "I'd like that," I said as Marcus guided me the final few feet to table 3, a prime location, visible and central. I felt the vibration of the room change. My phone buzzed in my clutch, but I didn't look. I didn't need to. Lydia would be texting, but the real communication was happening in the air somewhere across the room. At the Caldwell family table, table 2, my original table, a phone was lighting up. I could picture the message circulating among the board members. The Pinecrest elite. "Who is Marcus Hale with?" And the reply, "It's the complainer neighbor, the one they sat by the kitchen." And the inevitable game-changing follow-up, "Marcus Hale doesn't talk to kitchen tables. He just introduced her to Annabelle Whitlow." What's going on? We sat. The empty chair Marcus had mentioned was waiting. The other guests at the table, a local councilwoman, a prominent architect, and their spouses, paused their conversation. Marcus made the introductions, and again he led with my name and title. The energy was electric. I wasn't an outcast. I was a late-arriving VIP. I wasn't the lonely complainer. I was a colleague of Marcus Hale. A board member, one of Regina's boisterous allies, was weaving between tables with a high-end digital camera. Tasked with capturing candid moments, he spotted Marcus, a fellow member of the local establishment. "Hey, Marcus. Big shot. Give me a smile." The board member raised his camera. Marcus, without missing a beat, put his hand lightly on the back of my chair and leaned in as if sharing a private, amusing observation. "I believe they're about to serve a deconstructed tiramisu," he murmured, his eyes twinkling. "It's a high-risk maneuver." I laughed. A genuine, relaxed laugh. Click. The flash popped, blinding me for a second. The board member grinned, gave a thumbs up, and moved on, oblivious. I realized what had just happened. Regina had hired a videographer to capture my staged humiliation at the Community Spirit Award, but this board member had just captured the counter-narrative. Lila Voss, not as a wallflower and drab olive, but as the poised, laughing companion of one of the Valley's most respected figures. It was, as I'd planned, accidental reverse PR, a beautiful, unplanned checkmate. The shift was too palpable to ignore. Regina couldn't allow it. She slid from her chair at the head table. Her champagne flute held aloft like a scepter and began a slow, deliberate weave toward us. She was a shark moving through water, all smiles and white lace. "There you are," she cooed, arriving at our table. The guests quieted, sensing the confrontation. Regina draped one arm over my shoulder, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt proprietary. Her nails dug slightly into my skin. "I was so worried I looked over and you were gone from your table. I thought you'd left." The lie was so bald, so effortless. It was almost impressive. She was resetting the frame. My poor flighty, antisocial neighbor, the loving president, had to come find her. She then turned her high-wattage smile on Marcus. "And Marcus, oh my gosh, I didn't know you two knew each other. How random." Her eyes flicked between us, bright and sharp. "When did this happen?" This was the pivot. She was trying to frame me as a social climber, perhaps even imply I was making a move on a prominent guest at her gala. She was painting me as desperate. Marcus didn't stand, but he leaned back, his posture relaxed, taking the tension Regina was projecting and neutralizing it completely. "It's not random at all, Regina," he said, his voice pleasant but firm, carrying to the nearby tables. "Lila and I reconnected last week at Alder Hall." The name dropped into the conversation like a weighted stone. Alder Hall was the exclusive incubator for high-level venture capital and philanthropic pitches. It was a place Regina couldn't get into with a ticket. You had to be invited. You had to have a reason to be there. Regina's smile twitched. Lila was the keynote speaker for the new metrics session. Marcus continued, addressing the rest of the table. Not just Regina. She was formidable. We've been discussing a potential collaboration with the community fund. The architect at our table sat up straighter. You pitched at Alder? He asked me, his voice colored with a new deep respect. Regina's mask was slipping. This wasn't the narrative. I was supposed to be the dowdy, socially awkward complainer who couldn't keep friends. I wasn't supposed to be formidable. I wasn't supposed to be pitching at Alder Hall. I wasn't supposed to be collaborating with Marcus Hale. Her grip on my shoulder tightened for one painful second before she pulled her arm away, the gesture suddenly awkward, as if she'd touched something hot. Oh, she said, her voice a fraction too high. Wow, that's great, neighbor. Always working. She tried to make it sound like an insult, the old familiar barb, but the tip was dull. Couldn't pierce the new armor Marcus and I had just built. She was losing the room, and she knew it. She mumbled something about checking on the cake and fled back to the head table, her retreat noticeably faster than her approach. As she left, the atmosphere around table 3 changed. The gravitational pull of the room had shifted. People were no longer just looking. They were engaging. A woman from table 4, a Pierce cousin, leaned over. Lila Voss, I'm Sarah Beth. My cousin works at North Star. She says your strategy briefs are legendary. Even the ex-board member from table 17, my former prison, actually got up and walked over, a fresh drink in his hand. Lila, my goodness, the chair didn't tell me you were running strategy. My new firm is looking for a data consultant. I'll get your card later. The room had reframed me. I wasn't the neighbor in olive. I was the director of strategy. I was the Alder Hall pitcher. I was the woman Marcus Hale had publicly allied with. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't caused a scene. I had simply accepted an offer, walked across a room, and spoken my truth. The MC's voice boomed over the speakers again, cutting through the rising murmur. All right, ladies and gentlemen, get those elbows ready. We are just 15 minutes away from the Community Spirit Award presentation. All my dedicated residents, I want you on that dance floor in 15. Don't be shy. I saw Regina's head snap up. She looked across the room, past the cake, past the laughing guests, and her eyes locked on mine. The camera-ready smile was back. But this time it was different. It was a promise. It was pure, unadulterated triumph. She still had her ace in the hole. She still had her public execution planned. The narrative had shifted, but she was about to grab the microphone and yank it back. Marcus glanced at me, his expression unreadable. The humiliation rituals are escalating, he murmured, echoing his words from the terrace. Yes, I said, my hand resting on the clutch in my lap. The cream envelope inside felt cool and steady. But so is the defense. Regina thought she was about to hand out an award. She had no idea I was about to throw a grenade. The MC's voice was a shot of synthetic adrenaline injected into the room. All right, everyone. This is it. The moment you've all been waiting for. Get on that dance floor if you are dedicated. A few residents, mostly Regina's inner circle and a handful of hopeful neighbors, giggled and shrieked, making a show of being dragged onto the polished wooden floor. It was a small, slightly desperate-looking huddle. The rest of the room watched with the kind of lazy amusement reserved for blood sport. I remained seated at table 3. I had no intention of participating. My complainer status was a fact, not a performance. I took a sip of water, the ice clinking softly. Marcus was beside me, observing the spectacle with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist. Here we go, he murmured, his voice low. She's been planning this? I said just as quietly. My friend overheard the committee. This is the main event. Always the complainer shot. Never the hero, he finished. Regina stepped onto the dance floor. A triumphant goddess. The videographer, a wiry man with a heavy rig, suddenly appeared and knelt, aiming his lens not at the cluster of residents, but directly at her. The MC started the obligatory upbeat track. Regina turned her back to the crowd, the white lace of her dress seeming to glow. She held the oversized golden trophy aloft, a heavy, dense cluster of engraved plaques and trailing ribbons. It was beautiful and I noted remarkably solid. She held the pose, playing to the crowd. "Ready, neighbors?" she squealed. Then she did something that broke tradition. She paused. She turned her head just slightly and looked over her left shoulder. Her eyes, bright and predatory, scanned the room, bypassing the eager, waiting hands on the dance floor entirely. They found me sitting exposed at table 3. She smiled. It was a small, sharp, private smile of pure venomous intent. I saw the videographer subtly pivot, his lens swinging away from Regina and zooming past the dance floor, past the tables, coming to rest directly on me. The spotlight that had been on Regina's back didn't move, but a secondary, softer light clicked on, illuminating my section of the room. They had lit me. This was a stage. I read the entire sequence in the half-second it took her to tense her arm. This was not a presentation. This was an ambush. She wasn't handing it to someone. She was throwing it at me. She wanted to hit me. She wanted the camera to capture me flinching, cowering, or being struck in the face by her Community Spirit Award. She wanted the metaphor to be so brutally obvious that no one could miss it. My neighbor can't even catch a break, let alone an award. The music hit a crescendo. Regina's arm snapped back. She didn't loft it. She threw it. It was a tight, fast spiral, an astonishingly accurate missile of plaques and ribbons. It sailed over the heads of the confused residents on the dance floor. It flew across the 10 yards separating her from my table. I saw it coming. A pale cannonball of gold and engraving. I braced. I wouldn't duck. That would be the shot she wanted. I wouldn't raise my hands. That would be panic. I would simply sit there and take the hit. My dignity, my only shield. I felt the air displace as it neared, then motion to my left. Marcus hadn't leaped. He hadn't scrambled. In one fluid, economical movement, he had simply risen from his chair, his body eclipsing mine. His right hand came up, palm out. There was no sound of a struggle, just a soft, solid thump as the trophy, traveling at impressive speed, met his hand. He caught it one-handed, clean. Not a single ribbon fell to the floor. The music stopped. The MC, utterly baffled, hit the kill switch. The room, which had been buzzing with laughter and music, fell into a profound, echoing silence. Every eye was on us, on Marcus, standing tall, holding the Community Spirit Award, on me, sitting in his shadow. The videographer was frozen, his lens still pointed at us, capturing a scene that was nowhere in his script. Marcus looked at the trophy in his hand, a flicker of something like amusement. He adjusted a stray ribbon. Then he turned to me. The room held its breath. He didn't make a joke. He didn't toss it to me. He stepped forward, bent slightly at the waist in a gesture of courtly respect, and presented the trophy to me as I sat. "I believe this is yours, Lila," he said, his voice perfectly clear in the silent hall. He extended it. "They're your favorite colors, aren't they? Gold and green." I took it. My hand was perfectly steady. The scent of the polished metal and ribbons was overwhelming. A cloud of expensive polish. For a second, the silence held. Then, from the back of the room, someone whooped. A low sound began. A collective ooh from the guests. It wasn't a sound of pity. It was a sound of stunned appreciation. They had just witnessed a public execution, a last-second pardon, and a complete reversal of power. And then the architect at our table started to clap. Not politely. He was applauding. The applause spread, rolling from table 3 to table 4, then across the room. It was real, sustained applause. They weren't clapping for the tradition. They were clapping for the interception. They were clapping for the drama. The event planner, the same woman who had banished me to the hallway, was at my side in an instant. Her face was ashen, her professional smile a mask of pure panic. Her client's plan had just detonated on the launch pad, and she was in the blast radius. "Miss Voss," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Miss Voss, I am so sorry. There was a terrible logistical error with the seating chart." She was talking fast, her eyes darting between me and Regina, who was standing paralyzed on the dance floor. "Your place card. It was always meant for table 2. With the board. I can have your setting moved right now. I can fix this. Would you like me to move you to table 2? I looked at her. Then at table 2, where the board chair was staring at his napkin, and Elaine looked like she'd seen a ghost. Then I looked at table 3 at the empty chair Marcus had just vacated. I smiled at the planner, a calm, gentle smile. "Thank you so much," I said, my voice kind. "But that won't be necessary. I'm quite comfortable here." Her face crumpled in relief and confusion. Of course, Miss Voss. Please enjoy the evening." She scurried away as if fleeing a fire. The spell was broken. The MC, flustered, threw on a Frank Sinatra song. The room erupted in conversation. 100 debriefings happening at once. The entire social tectonic plate of the gala had just shifted. And the new allies came. 2 of Elaine's board friends, Aunt Beth and Aunt Carol, who had offered me nothing but a tight-lipped hello earlier, suddenly abandoned their table. They descended on us, pulling up empty chairs from a nearby table, their faces wreathed in newfound familial affection. "Lila, honey," Aunt Beth gushed, touching my arm. "We've barely had a chance to speak. You look absolutely radiant. That olive silk is so sophisticated, isn't it, Carol?" "Just stunning," Carol agreed, her eyes wide. "And Seattle? My goodness, we must hear all about it." "Elaine said you're doing something incredible with data." I held the trophy in my lap. "A trophy of war." "It's a strategy," I said, smiling at them. "It's all about reframing the narrative." Across the room, I watched the other pieces fall. Regina's husband looked lost. He was staring at Regina, who had stumbled off the dance floor and was now at the open bar, not her table. He looked at his mother, Eleanor Pierce. The matriarch was not confused. She was sitting at table 2, her posture rigid. She had seen everything. She had seen the targeted throw. She had seen the catch. She had seen Marcus's deferential handoff. She had heard the planner's frantic, whispered apology. She understood exactly what had happened. She saw that her board president had just attempted a public, petty, and worst of all, failed humiliation of a resident. Regina had shown her hand, and it was weak. Mrs. Pierce's eyes met mine across the room. She held my gaze for a long assessing moment. Then, slowly, she raised her champagne flute an inch off the table. It was not a toast. It was a signal, a small, sharp nod of approval. Point scored, Miss Voss. Regina had her back to the room, but I could see her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Her smile was gone. Her shoulders were shaking. She snapped her fingers at the bartender for another drink. He poured it and she downed half the glass in one unladylike gulp. As she set the glass down, I saw it. A tiny, furious, involuntary twitch at the corner of her left eye. She was rattling. The architect at our table leaned in, his expression one of pure admiration. That, he said, his voice low, was the most impressive non-financial hostile takeover I have ever witnessed in my life. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick embossed business card. My apologies for interrupting the celebration, Lila, but Annabelle Whitlow was right. We need to talk. My firm is pitching a new market entry for the entire Pacific Northwest. Your insight, well, I'd be willing to pay handsomely for a private consultation. I took the card. The gravity of the room had changed. The floor, which had been sloped so steeply against me, forcing me to claw my way up, had just tilted. It was leveling out. No, I realized as I held the heavy trophy in one hand and the heavy card stock in the other. It wasn't leveling. It was tipping in my direction. The applause from the award presentation had died down, but the energy in the room remained fundamentally altered. The air was charged, the conversations buzzing with the new, revised history of the evening. I saw Regina still at the bar throw back the last of her champagne. She wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. The award presentation was meant to be her checkmate, the public crowning of my defeat, and Marcus Hale had snatched it literally from the air and handed it to me as a crown. She was losing. The narrative she had spent months crafting of her triumph, her beauty, her success, and my corresponding failure was dissolving in real time, and she was not a woman who could tolerate loss. She slammed the empty flute on the bar. I watched her in the mirror. Her eyes were two burning points of light. She was too drunk to be subtle, too furious to be strategic. She was going to burn the whole thing down. She pushed off the bar and stalked, not to her table, but to the MC's podium. The man was in the middle of introducing a slow song. Regina grabbed the microphone from his hand. Her movement so sudden the speaker shrieked with feedback, a high, piercing sound that cut through every conversation. The room flinched. The music died. 200 guests turned to look at my president, who now stood bathed in the purple and blue stage lights, her white dress looking garish, her knuckles white on the mic. I just have to say one more thing, she slurred, trying to affect a tone of tipsy heartfelt emotion. Came out brittle and harsh. It's so wonderful seeing everyone here, everyone I love. Her husband half stood from the head table, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Regina, he said, his voice too quiet to carry. And I'm just so happy, she continued, her eyes sweeping the room until they locked on mine. I'm so happy I found my perfect community. And I just know my neighbor Lila, she's going to find hers, too. I just know it. A few people clapped weakly, uncertainly. This was not on the program. She's had a hard time, Regina plowed on, her voice adopting a tone of pity that was more insulting than any slur. She's so smart, you know, and neighbors don't always like that. The air in the room became very still. The clatter of cutlery stopped. I could hear the hum of the ice machine from the bar. I mean, do you guys remember the solar panel proposal? My God, Lila was so sure it was the one. She was writing grants, grading proposals. She was all in. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could hear Aunt Carol's sharp, indrawn breath. And then, Regina said, her voice dropping into a stage whisper of conspiracy. The board reviewed it. Ouch. Right. No one laughed. The silence was absolute, suffocating. I felt Marcus beside me, tense. He didn't look at me. He looked at Regina, his expression one of cold, profound disgust. But she bounced back, Regina said, her voice rising to a false cheer. She always bounces back. Then there was the mailbox complaint. Remember that, Lila? It was so cute, but oh, this is the sad part. The board told her she was too ambitious. Can you believe that? Too ambitious. She said she felt like she was in a competition and, well, she left. I stared at her. This was a vivisection. She was naming names, picking at old scars, turning my personal history into a public cautionary tale. She was methodically, surgically attempting to destroy the new narrative of the poised, professional woman Marcus had just built. She was reminding the room, she is not formidable. She is a failure. She is unlovable. And the flag violation, she said, now fully into her performance, pacing the edge of the dance floor. The one that moved to appeals. He didn't even tell her. Did he? Neighbor. She showed up at the hearing with her documents and he was just gone. Poof. She laughed. A short, ugly bark. God. It's like a tragedy. But I know your perfect community is out there somewhere. Neighbor, you have to keep trying. Don't give up. She raised the microphone like a toast. Here's to not giving up. We're all rooting for you. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it was pressing the oxygen out of my lungs. The guests were paralyzed. They stared at their plates. They stared at the floral centerpieces. A man at the next table took a long, slow, noisy sip of water, the sound echoing. They were embarrassed for me. They were horrified by her. Beside me, Marcus moved. His chair legs scraped against the floor, a sound like a gunshot. He was rising. He was a man of honor, and he was about to intervene, to shut this down, to defend me. Before he was halfway out of his chair, I put my hand on his forearm. His muscles were rigid. He stopped, turning to look at me, his eyes dark with a protective anger. I didn't look at him. I was still watching Regina, who was frozen in her grotesque, triumphant pose. I squeezed his arm once. A single, clear, telepathic message. Sit down. Let me. He hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly sank back into his chair. But he stayed on the edge of it, a coiled spring. Ready? I waited. I let the silence stretch for 3 more heartbeats. I let Regina's toxic words hang in the air, congealing like poison. I let every guest in the room fully absorb the naked, desperate cruelty of the president. Then slowly, I stood up. I didn't snatch at anything. I didn't rush. I calmly picked up my glass of water. The trophy of gold was a fragrant shield on my lap. My hand was perfectly steady. The olive dress, which Mrs. Pierce had called severe, now felt like armor. The videographer, who had been focused on Regina, now panned to me. The spotlight found me. I was in it. Regina was in it. The camera framed us both. The frantic, agitated president and the still, calm resident. I looked at Regina. I did not smile. I did not frown. I was a mirror. Thank you, Regina, I said. My voice was not loud, but in the dead silence, it carried to every corner of the room. It was clear and cool. Thank you for those well wishes. The pause between those and well wishes was a razor's edge. I saw Regina's smile flicker. The tick at her eye was back, jumping. I turned my gaze from her and addressed the room, my new audience. My president is right, I said. I have had experiences. I owned it. I took the shame she had tried to drape over me and I wore it like a badge. I think most of us have. That is, after all, how we learn. I paused again, letting the simple truth of that land. We all learn, I continued, my voice measured and serene. How to eventually choose what we deserve. It was not a shout. It was a scalpel. I heard it land. I heard the tiny collective intake of breath from the tables around me. The implication was crystal clear. Unspoken but deafening. I learned from my mistakes, which is why I am strong and single and whole. You, Regina, in your desperation to win, have just shown everyone what you were willing to deserve. I had taken her entire list of my failures and reframed it as a testament to my high standards. I saw her husband flinch. He understood. Oh, he understood perfectly. I was not finished. I turned my full attention back to the head table, to Regina and to her husband. I raised my water glass higher. So, to the happy leadership, I said. Regina on autopilot raised her microphone, a strange reflexive gesture. May your new term, I said, my voice resonating with a profound quiet sincerity, be a perfect reflection of the kindness, the grace, and the integrity you have both shown to others tonight. I drank. The sentence hung in the air, a perfectly constructed, devastating blessing. I had not insulted her. I had not raised my voice. I had not contested a single fact. I had simply taken the two virtues she had so profoundly demonstrated a lack of, kindness and integrity, and wished them back upon her. I had wished her a leadership as hollow, as mean, and as bankrupt as her own character. I had blessed her with an empty cup. For a full 5 seconds there was nothing. Then from the head table, the board chair let out a noise, a strangled panicked ha. That was half laugh, half cough. That's my board, he stammered, his face slick with sweat, pulling at the collar of his shirt. Always so sharp. His tuxedo vest was, I noted, pulling awkwardly, a button undone. He looked messy. He looked weak. Elaine did not move. She was staring at the white damask napkin in her lap. Her hands were clenched together and I could see her from across the room twisting her HOA pin. Twisting. She was a socialite. She understood the precise lethal nature of the wound I had just inflicted. She had just watched my controlled, strategic, high-class response. She was a woman who understood power. She had just witnessed a hostile takeover, and she was recalculating the terms of her board's merger. She looked at Regina, then at her husband, then at me. Her expression was one of pure cold financial calculation. She had just identified the liability. The videographer, realizing the drama was with me, was still zoomed in. He captured me as I sat back down calmly. He then panned to Regina, who was standing, slack-jawed, the microphone buzzing in her hand. Her face, which had been alight with manic triumph, was now pale and empty. She didn't understand what had happened. She just knew she had lost. The whispers started. They were quiet at first, then grew, a rising tide of sound filling the vacuum. Oh my God! Did you hear what she said? She wished them the kindness they showed tonight. That wasn't a toast. That was a curse. I knew there was something deeper going on here. What is wrong with Regina? Who does that? The neighbor. Lila. My God. That was surgical. The narrative was no longer mine to seize. The room had taken it and was running with it. I picked up my fork and took a bite of my long cold salmon. It was delicious. The applause from my toast had faded, but the silence it left behind was louder. The entire social geometry of the room had been warped. I was no longer the outcast at table 17. I was now the focal point of a different, more complex story, and the guests were voracious for the next chapter. Aunts who had ignored me were now patting my hand, asking invasive questions about Seattle. The board chair was at the bar, his back to me, drinking whiskey with a rapid jerking motion. Elaine had disappeared onto the terrace, a thin column of cigarette smoke rising above the balustrade. Regina, had fled to the bridal suite, no, the president's lounge, the videographer trailing her hopefully. I had won the battle, but the victory felt acidic. The adrenaline that had sharpened my words now left a cold, shaking void. Marcus sat beside me, a bastion of calm in the chaos I had unleashed. The architect at our table was trying to talk to me about data modeling, but his words were just sounds. I needed to see the proof. I needed to anchor the emotional violence of the last hour to the cold, hard facts I held in my clutch. "Excuse me," I murmured to Marcus. I need a moment. "I'll cover," he said, not asking where I was going. He understood this wasn't about a social exit. I didn't go to the terrace. Elaine's silent disappointment was a judgment I didn't have the strength for right now. I didn't go to the front. The gauntlet of curious, pitying guest stares was too much. Instead, I walked back toward the corner I had once occupied. I slipped past table 17, past the hiss-thump of the kitchen doors, and into a narrow carpeted service corridor. It was silent. The flocked wallpaper was a deep, absorbing crimson. The air was still, smelling faintly of industrial carpet cleaner and dust. The muffled thump-thump-thump of the reception's bass line felt miles away. I leaned my head against the cool wall, closing my eyes for one single beat. My heart was a cold, slow drum. I clicked open my clutch, the cream-colored envelope. I'd been carrying it for 3 hours. A physical weight in my hand, a symbolic weight in my gut. Now it was time. My hands were perfectly steady. I slid the folded documents out. They were copies. Of course, the originals were in a safe deposit box in Seattle. But the ink on these was sharp, the details damning. I unfolded the first sheet. Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund, Charter of Terms, March 2018. My predecessor, Lucille, 2 months before she passed. I'd found this copy in her old roll-top desk, tucked inside a book on gardening, 6 months ago. My eyes, practiced at scanning legal briefs, went straight to the relevant clause. Section 4. Addendum B. The Lila Voss Resident Improvement Grant. It was all there. A designated ring-fenced sum set apart from the general trust to be allocated for my full solar project and stipend. My predecessor's signature at the bottom was a familiar spidery comfort. I unfolded the second sheet. Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund Amendment, July 2020. I had pulled this one from the board accountant's online portal using a password I was never supposed to have. Section 4. Addendum B. The same clause, but this time a thick, brutal red line was slashed through it. Not a type strike through. Not a legal deletion, a pen, an angry, impatient ballpoint pen, and in the margin, a handwritten note in an unmistakable arrogant cursive. The board chair's temp transfer to primary account for RC's pre-gala allocations. Will rebalance Q4. The RC's pre-gala allocations, this 7-tiered cake, the sponsorship of the clubhouse, the deposit for this very estate. He had taken my future and used it as a down payment for Regina's fantasy. Will rebalance, a casual, dismissive lie, as if my entire project was just an invoice he'd get around to paying. I unfolded the third sheet, a printout of an email from our board accountant. Bob Simmons, a man who used to give me lemon drops when I was a child. Subject, FWD, Fund Allocation. Regina, per your directive, the transfer from the resident grant subaccount to the primary Pinecrest household account is complete. The reallocation will be noted in the quarterly filings as discretionary community expenses. Let me know if you need anything else. Per your directive, the bland corporate language of conspiracy. Discretionary community expenses. The vagueness was the confession. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A violent, angry sound in the dead quiet of the hallway. I pulled it out. A new text from Lydia. Lila, be careful. The chair is furious about your toast. He's at the bar with Uncle Mark. I just heard him say, what's her problem? She's lucky she's here at all. We paid for her project. Didn't we? The resident grant it didn't pass the board. I told her that. I told her she just wasn't qualified. I read the text twice. Not qualified. I closed my eyes. The hallway disappeared. It was 2020. I was sitting on the floor of my tiny post-college apartment in Boston. The email from the board chair was open on my laptop. Lila, bad news. The board reviewed your application for the grant. Unfortunately, they've decided to go in a different direction. They didn't feel your application was strong enough this cycle. I'm sorry, kiddo. I fought for you. I remember the feeling. It wasn't just disappointment at the loss of the money. It was a cold, hollowing shame. I hadn't been good enough. My proposal, my meticulously crafted plans for solar panels, not strong enough. The rejection I believed was a verdict on my merit. That lie was the real theft. The money I could replace. I took the job at North Star Metrics a week later, a job I hadn't even wanted because I needed the salary. I took out loans to cover my cross-country move. I worked 80-hour weeks fueled by a corrosive blend of ambition and the shame of that failure. I built my entire reputation on the false narrative that I hadn't been qualified. Regina's toast. Her litany of my failed complaints wasn't a random act of drunken cruelty. It was a maintenance check. It was her reinforcing the board story. Lila fails. Lila is too ambitious. Lila is not enough. It was the cover story for the crime. I pulled the last two items from the envelope. One was a small, delicate cream-colored note card, my predecessor's personal stationery, a handwritten letter to her attorney, which had been paper-clipped to the original charter. James, she had written, her elegant hand shaky with age. The fund's entire purpose is to ensure a fair and equal opportunity for all residents. Regina has her charms and the board will always indulge them. But Lila has her vision. This grant is to protect Lila's vision from the board's impulses. This clause is not negotiable. She had seen it. She had known. She had tried to build a firewall. And the board chair had taken a pen and burned it down. The final item was a photograph. A grainy time-stamped camera still from the Pinecrest National Bank. Lydia's friend, a teller, had pulled it for me. The date was July 22nd, 2020, one day after the accountant's email. It was the board chair at the counter, and beside him, her face bright and smiling, co-signing the withdrawal slip, was Regina. She wasn't just the beneficiary. She wasn't a passive princess. She was an active, knowing accomplice. She had smiled in the board chair's face as they cashed out my future to pay for her gala. The thump-thump of the music grew louder and the service door swung open. It was Marcus. He wasn't holding a drink. He just stood there taking in the scene. Me against the crimson wallpaper, surrounded by a paper trail of the board's betrayal. You were gone longer than a moment, he said, his voice quiet, not judging. I figured the victory lap was getting claustrophobic. His eyes dropped to the documents in my hand. The cream envelope, he stated. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my throat tight. Regina's toast, I managed to say, my voice rough. That list of my failures, it wasn't random. It was the story they wrote to cover this. I handed him the 2020 amendment. This is where my resident grant went. I showed him the handwritten note. RC's Gala costs. Then I handed him the bank photo. She was with him. She knew. Marcus looked at the documents. He wasn't a sympathetic friend, offering comfort. He was a strategist. The man who managed the Valley Fund. He was analyzing a hostile asset seizure. His face was calm, his eyes sharp, moving with a lawyer's precision. He scanned the 2018 charter, then the 2020 amendment, then the accountant's email. He was silent for a long time. Lila, he said, his voice dropping, becoming intense. This is bad. But look here. He held up the 2020 amendment. He pointed to the signature block at the bottom. The board chair signed as trustee. The accountant Simmons signed as fund manager. But this third line, he tapped a blank empty line on the form. The original charter, the 2018 document, your predecessor's terms, It specifies that any amendment to a core beneficiary addendum, especially one named and ring-fenced like your grant, must be reviewed and countersigned by the original executive of the estate. The previous president's lawyer, I whispered, the name coming to me, James Breyer. He retired. He moved to Florida right after she passed. The line is blank. Lila, Marcus said, his voice flat and hard. They didn't get his signature. They skipped it. The board chair and the accountant filed this, hoping no one would ever check the original charter. That scribble and red pen, it's just graffiti. He looked up at me, the full devastating weight of his discovery settling on us in the quiet hallway. This amendment is not just immoral, it's not legally valid. I stared at him, the implications branching out in my mind. 1,000 dark possibilities. The toast, the award, the seating chart. It was all a distraction, a social smokescreen to hide a common, ugly crime. Marcus handed the papers back to me, his touch careful, as if they were now evidence in an active case. This is felony fraud. Lila, he said simply. The board chair and your president conspired to defraud a trust. Your trust. He glanced back at the door where the sound of the MC announcing the final thank yous was filtering through, the sound of applause, of Regina's manufactured happiness. If this truth comes out in there, he said, his gaze meeting mine cold and clear, the story of tonight changes completely. Your toast will be the least of their worries. The words felony fraud hung in the silent corridor between us. A tangible, chilling presence. The muffled sounds of the reception music. Laughter. The clink of glasses seemed to come from another world, a frivolous planet I no longer inhabited. I carefully, deliberately folded the documents and slid them back into the cream envelope. The paper felt different now. It was no longer a collection of painful memories. It was a weapon. Marcus's gaze was steady, assessing. What's your next move? He asked. Not what are you going to do, but what is your next move? He saw it as I did a chessboard. I don't know, I said, and it was the truth. The knowledge was too new, too vast. I came here for an apology I knew I'd never get. I found a crime I never expected. Sometimes they're the same thing, he observed. He nodded toward the door. They've started the final thank yous. Regina is back on the floor, smiling. The machine is resetting. We walked back into the hall. The room was a swirl of motion of silk dresses and the twinkle of 1,000 fairy lights strung through the rafters. It looked beautiful, but I could now see the cracks in the facade, the tension humming beneath the surface. My toast had been a tremor. The papers in my hand were the earthquake to come. As if on cue, the MC's voice, slick with manufactured excitement, boomed over the speakers. Okay, everyone, it's your turn. All my dedicated residents, I want you front and center. The board chair is about to launch the final thank yous. A groan went through the room, followed by a few boisterous shouts from the board members. The board chair, looking deeply uncomfortable, was seated on a chair in the middle of the dance floor. Regina, her smile brittle and overly bright, hiked up her dress and presented her leg with the flourish of a showgirl. No, she stood beside the podium. The board chair fumbled with the notes, his movements clumsy. The crowd laughed, felt forced. The light, celebratory mood Regina had tried so hard to cultivate had been permanently soured. The board chair finally pulled the notes free. He stood, turned his back, and began the thank yous with the awkward, over-the-shoulder motion of a man who just wanted the ordeal to be over. It was a wild toss of thanks, sailing high and wide over the small, unenthusiastic huddle of residents. It flew directly toward our table, a dark blue ribbon tumbling through the air. Marcus didn't even stand up. He simply lifted his hand, palm up, and the notes fell into it as gently as a leaf. The MC went wild. We have a winner. And look at that. The gentleman who caught the thank yous is sitting with the lovely lady who caught the award. It's fate, people. Fate. A spotlight hit us hot and white. The board member whooped and hollered. Regina's face, I saw, was a mask of thunderous fury. This was another unscripted moment. Another scene where she was not the star. Get up here. You too. The MC shouted. We've got a tradition to uphold. Let's get our lovely award catcher in the chair. The room was watching. This was the sequel to the award presentation, and they were hungry for it. Marcus looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave the slightest of nods. Play the game, but play it our way. I walked to the chair and sat, my spine straight, the trophy of gold still on my lap. Marcus followed, the notes dangling from his fingers. He looked not at the MC, but at me. Okay, my man, the MC crowed. You know the rules. You got to put it on her and not too low. Now he winked at the crowd, who laughed obediently. The air was thick with a cheap, leering anticipation. Marcus ignored him. He walked to the chair where I sat. He didn't loom over me. Instead, he dropped to one knee. It was not a gesture of proposal. It was a gesture of deference, of respect, like a courtier before a queen. The crowd quieted, their boisterous mood shifting to one of intense curiosity. This was not in the script. He didn't reach for my thigh. He didn't even look at my knee. He gently took my foot, his touch light and impersonal on my silk-clad heel, and lifted it just an inch, resting it on his knee. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace, he slid the note over my foot and up to my ankle, where it rested, innocuous and chaste. He did not let his fingers linger. The entire act took less than 5 seconds. Then he stood, gave a small, polite bow of his head, and walked back to our table without a single backward glance. The MC was speechless. The crowd was, for the second time that night, stunned into silence. They had expected a clumsy, embarrassing, slightly sexualized ritual. They had just witnessed a masterclass in quiet, devastating dignity. And then the applause started. It was louder than before, more profound. It was a wave of genuine, heartfelt approval. Mrs. Pierce, I saw, was clapping. Her expression one of deep, almost academic appreciation. The women in the room were not just clapping. They were smiling, nodding, their eyes shining. Marcus hadn't just saved me from embarrassment. He had elevated the moment for all of them. The social whirlwind spun up again, faster now. Its vortex centered on table 3. Annabelle Whitlow, the Silverline Fund matriarch, appeared at my side as if summoned. Miss Voss, she said, her gin-dry voice cutting through the noise. She ignored Marcus completely. My foundation is hosting a private brunch tomorrow for our Pinecrest Initiative donors. 10 o'clock at my estate. I expect to see you there. She wasn't asking. She was recruiting. She didn't call me the complainer. She called me Miss Voss. She was opening a door into her world and she was holding it for me. I'll be there, I said. Just as Mrs. Whitlow turned to leave, I saw another more frantic movement. The event planner, she was power walking toward table 2. A single pristine calligraphed place card in her hand. The crowd, sensing more drama, parted for her. She reached the table where the board chair was now slumped in his seat in full view of at least 50 guests. She snatched up a half-empty glass of wine, and with a grand theatrical gesture, she placed my name card, Lila Voss, in its rightful place right beside the board chair. The correction was now public record. The planner didn't look at me, but the message was clear. The house apologizes for the error. The house is making amends. From across the room, I saw the first crack in the united front of the happy couple. The board chair had Regina cornered near the towering, untouched seven-tiered cake. His back was to me, but I could see his shoulders were rigid, his posture radiating a cold fury. "Stop this," I heard him hiss, his voice low but sharp. "Just stop it, Regina. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing me." Regina looked like a cornered animal. "She started it," she spat, her voice a venomous whisper. "She's trying to ruin everything." "She's not doing anything," he shot back. "She's just sitting there. You are the one making scenes." He reached for her arm. "We're leaving after the cake. We're done." Regina ripped her arm from his grasp. Her eyes were blazing, her carefully constructed mask of presidential bliss utterly shattered. "Don't you dare tell me what to do," she snarled and turned on her heel, stalking away from her husband. Then a softer presence. Elaine had materialized beside my chair, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. The scent of cigarette smoke and expensive perfume clung to her. "Lila," she whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time all night. "Oh, Lila, I am so sorry." A tear traced a path through her perfect foundation. I saw what she was doing with the invitation, with the seating. I knew and I didn't stop it. Her voice broke. "I was a coward. A board member is supposed to protect the residents. And I didn't protect you. I should have protected you." She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was cold. It was the apology I had come for, and it was, I realized with a pang of sorrow, completely and utterly irrelevant now. Her social cowardice was a misdemeanor. The document in my purse was a felony. The videographer, ever the opportunist, had drifted over. He saw the tears, the clasped hands. He raised his camera and the soft red light blinked on. He was capturing this moment of bored reconciliation, framing it in soft focus. It was another piece of the new story. Lila, the gracious wronged resident, forgiving her weeping ally. Just as the moment was about to feel real, it was broken. Lila, the board chair. He stood there, his face flushed with whiskey, his tie askew. He was trying to project an air of paternal authority of a man taking charge, but he just looked dissolute and weak. He looked at Elaine's tears, at my calm expression, and he fell back on his oldest, most reliable script. "Come on now," he said, forcing a jovial, wheedling tone. "Let's not make a big thing of it. You know how Regina gets. She's emotional. It's her big night. She gets a little carried away. You know how she is, Lila. You know how she is." The 4 words he had used my entire tenure to excuse Regina's cruelty, to normalize her malice, to make me the adult in the room, the one who had to understand. But the words didn't land. They sounded hollow, absurd in the face of the evening's evidence. Elaine pulled her hand away from mine and looked at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. "Don't, chair," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "Just don't." He recoiled, stunned. His primary ally had just defected. The videographer panned from Elaine's face to the board chairs, capturing his slack-jawed confusion. The room was no longer just watching me. They were watching the complete public implosion of the Pinecrest board. I felt a presence beside me. Marcus had not moved. He subtly angled his body, creating a small pocket of privacy for us amidst the chaos. He wasn't looking at my board drama. He was looking at his watch, a simple, elegant timepiece with a dark leather strap. "The owner of the estate is about to give the final thank yous," he said, his voice a low, calm anchor in the storm. "He'll thank the caterers, the band, and the sponsors." He looked up from his watch, his eyes meeting mine. They were clear, strategic, and deadly serious. "The board chair's name is on the sponsorship plaque in the wine cellar. So is Regina's. They will be thanked by name in front of everyone. He paused. If you're going to say something, Lila, if you're going to bring the truth to light, it has to be at exactly the right moment. He didn't tell me what to do. He just laid out the facts. He was showing me the stage. He was pointing to the spotlight and he was letting me decide if I was ready to step into it. The board chairs panicked. Wheedling voice. You know how she is. Lila was still hanging in the air when my phone vibrated in my lap. The entire reception hall was a superheated mess of whispers, Elaine's betrayal, and the board chair's weakness. I was an island of calm at table 3, the trophy of gold resting on the table like a surrendered flag. I glanced down. A new message from Lydia. Watch out. Regina just grabbed the original photographer, not the video guy, and she's coming for you. She looks insane. She said something about a private neighbor shot. She's heading your way. The shark was circling again. Regina had lost the public battle twice. The award, the toast, Elaine's defection. She had lost the room. Now she was reverting to her base tactic, isolation. I didn't have to wait. She materialized at my side, a ghost in white lace. The last 30 minutes of trauma had been plastered over with a fresh, thick layer of foundation. The tears were gone. The smile was back, stapled to her face. It was a terrifying, brilliant, brittle thing. It didn't touch her eyes, which were two burning coals of pure, undiluted spite. She wasn't drunk anymore. She was running on a fuel more potent rage. Lila, she cooed, her voice a sweet, false syrup that made the guests at my table pause their conversations. Oh, there you are. I've been looking everywhere. She didn't offer a hand. She seized my wrist. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my skin. It was not an invitation. It was an arrest. We simply must get one decent photo, she announced to the table. Just the two of us. For the album. The lighting in here is just terrible for the skin. She was pulling hard. To resist would be a scene. To resist would be to play her game, to look like the difficult, uncooperative neighbor she had tried to paint me as. I stood, my chair scraping back softly. Of course, I said. The cream envelope in my clutch felt heavy, a slab of stone. She didn't lead me to the curated photo booth by the entrance. She didn't lead me to the beautifully lit terrace. She dragged me, her heels clicking angrily on the marble, away from the warmth, away from the light. We passed the bar. We passed the grand staircase. We went past the restrooms and past the service corridor I had hidden in earlier. She was pulling me deep into the administrative wing of the estate, a place where guests were not meant to go. The hallway was narrow, the carpet a thick sound-absorbing burgundy. The music from the reception faded, replaced by the low hum of a ventilation system. The walls were lined with dark, imposing portraits of forgotten founders, their eyes seeming to follow us. Brass sconces cast oily weak pools of yellow light. The air was cold, smelling of floor wax and old dusty upholstery. It was a perfect isolated silent stage for an interrogation. At the end of the hall was a heavy arched oak door. A small elegant brass plate on it read Pinecrest Cellar, Private. She stopped here so abruptly I almost stumbled into her. We were alone. The long carpeted hallway was empty. This was it. She let go of my wrist, shoving me back a step. The smile vanished. It didn't fade. It was a mask that she ripped off. Her face underneath was a grotesque mess of fury. What the hell? She hissed, her voice a low, vibrating snarl. Do you think you are doing? I'm attending my neighborhood's gala, I said. My voice was flat, an echo in the dead space. You ruined it. You hear me? You ruined it. Her whisper was more violent than a scream. My toast. Your performance. That stunt with Marcus. You came here to humiliate me, to make me look small. I didn't say a single untrue word, I said. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? She spat, taking a step closer. I could smell the champagne on her breath, sour and sharp with your important job in Seattle and your severe dress and your judging, always judging me. You threw an award at my head. Regina, you deserved it, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You deserved all of it. Coming here, bringing all your darkness into my perfect night. The photographer, the stills guy, suddenly appeared at the end of the hall, his heavy camera in his hand, looking profoundly uncomfortable. Regina, you said you wanted the shot down here. The mask snapped back into place so fast it gave me whiplash. Yes, Brian. Right here, Regina chirped. The sunny president returning. She spun, grabbed me, and pulled me into a brutal one-armed hug, her arm a steel bar across my back. She plastered herself against my side. One neighbor shot for the album. She smiled into the lens, a dazzling 100-watt, utterly fake smile. Smile, Lila, she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss in my ear. Her nails digging so hard into my back I was sure they would tear the silk. I looked at the camera. I did not smile. I did not frown. I was a mirror reflecting the cold, hard truth of the moment. One shot, I said, not to Regina, but to the photographer. I was setting my own boundary. Click. The flash was blinding. A pop of white light that echoed in the narrow hall. Again, Regina snarled at him. She's not smiling. She looks awful. Do it again. Lila. Smile. What is wrong with you? I think he has the shot, I said. I said again. A shadow detached itself from the far end of the hallway where the corridor met the main reception. A figure standing in the archway, backlit, his hands in the pockets of his suit. Marcus. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He was just there, observing, a silent, unmovable witness. His presence radiated a calm, profound. No, I am here. I am watching. You are not alone. Regina saw him. Her face, which was already a mess of conflicting, furious expressions, contorted. Are you stalking me? She screeched at him, forgetting the photographer entirely. This is a private neighbor moment. Get out. Marcus didn't move. I was just admiring the architecture, his voice replied, cool and distant, floating down the hall. This is a beautiful late 19th century corridor. Regina was vibrating with rage. Trapped. She was cornered by the photographer in front of her, me at her side and Marcus at her back. She had, in her attempt to isolate me, isolated herself. And it was at that exact moment, the moment of her greatest distraction, that the heavy arched oak door beside us swung open. A man in a black vest and sommelier's apron stepped out, holding an empty wooden wine crate. Excuse me, folks, he murmured, his eyes down, pushing past us with the practiced invisibility of service staff. But the door, it didn't close. He had propped it open with a small rubber wedge, preparing for another trip. A soft golden light spilled out from the cellar, painting the wall and the dark carpet. It was a warm, inviting light, and it smelled of damp earth, old oak, and sleeping, expensive wine. My eyes automatically were drawn to the light, to the entryway, to the wall just inside the jamb, now perfectly illuminated. It wasn't a small sign. It was a massive, polished, gleaming copper plaque mounted on a thick slab of dark, oiled walnut. It was new, the centerpiece of the cellar entrance. The engraving was deep, elegant, and perfectly lit. My heart didn't stop. It just started to beat in a different, slower, heavier rhythm. This 2020 restoration of the historic Pinecrest cellar was made possible by a foundational endowment from the Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund. The words hit me like a physical blow. 2020, the exact year, The exact fund. My predecessor's legacy. My grant. Regina was still yelling at Marcus. The photographer was lowering his camera. Confused, I took a step, detaching myself from Regina's grip. I moved into the doorway, into that warm golden light. There was a second, smaller plaque just beneath it, a companion piece designed to look like a framed receipt or ledger entry, also etched in copper. In grateful appreciation of the patrons who personally facilitated this historic project. And beneath that, etched into the metal clear as day in the golden light, were two signatures. Board Chair, Trustee. Regina Caldwell, Project Liaison. I touched the gold medal. Project Liaison. She hadn't just co-signed the withdrawal. She hadn't just been a passive recipient. She had managed it. She had actively, joyfully managed the theft of my grant to buy a wine cellar for her gala venue, a sponsorship plaque, a monument to her own vanity, paid for with my future. What are you looking at? Regina snapped, her voice breaking my trance. She finally noticed I was gone. She stalked toward me, her face pale with rage. What is so interesting? Get out of the damn doorway. At that exact critical second, the other camera, the videographer, came jogging down the hall. He was in full B-roll mode, his heavy rig light on, scanning for candid moments. Regina, there you are. We're doing the What's going on here? His light, a brilliant harsh white LED, flooded the narrow hallway. It was brighter than the sconces, brighter than the cellar light. It illuminated Regina's furious, contorted face. It illuminated my still white, shocked face, and it landed with devastating clarity directly on the gleaming copper plaque I was staring at. The red recording light on his camera was on. Get that light out of my face, Regina shrieked, throwing a hand up to shield her eyes. But the videographer, sensing drama, held his ground. This was the raw emotional content presidents paid extra for. His lens zoomed. It zoomed past me, past Regina's angry, batting hand. It zoomed in. It focused on the plaque. It captured the light gleaming off the raised letters. The Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund. Panned down, capturing the signatures. Board Chair. Regina Caldwell. He was just getting B-roll. He thought he was capturing a lovely sentimental detail of the board's generous sponsorship. He had no idea he was documenting in high-definition video the central, irrefutable proof of a felony. I heard the tiny mechanical whir of his camera's autofocus as it locked onto the signatures. It was all one thing. The realization was so clear, so cold. It was almost peaceful. The lies about my grant, the imaginary board that had rejected me, the not qualified, the vicious public performance of my failures during the toast, the frantic, obsessive need to paint me as the lonely, dateless neighbor. It was all a story, a grand, elaborate, cruel piece of fiction written to hide this, to hide the simple, grubby, criminal fact that they stole my money to pay for this party. Regina was still yelling. The videographer, sensing he'd overstepped, was backing away, the light still on. Marcus was still watching, his face unreadable in the shadows. I turned away from the plaque. I looked at my president, her face ugly and distorted in the harsh camera light. I reached into my clutch. My fingers found the sharp, stiff edge of the cream envelope. I didn't take it out. I just held it. I closed the clutch. The magnetic snap clicked shut. The sound was as loud and final and definitive as a cell door locking. All the pieces were in my hand. The paper proof. And now the physical, publicly recorded proof. The puzzle was solved. The game was over. All that was left was to announce the winner. I walked out of the narrow, dark corridor, leaving Regina frozen in the harsh, fading light of the videographer, who was now awkwardly backing away, apologizing. Marcus was gone from his post at the end of the hall, but I knew he hadn't left. He was repositioning. I stepped back into the main reception hall. The contrast was jarring. The air was warm, thick with the scent of coffee, cut flowers, and spilled champagne. The energy, however, was fractured, chaotic. The party was breaking apart. And then the MC's voice, layered with a false end-of-night sentimentality, cut through the noise. All right, everyone. That's Don't Stop Believing. You've been a beautiful crowd. We're coming up on our last song in just 5 minutes. So, if there's someone you've been wanting to dance with, this is your last chance. The music shifted to a slow, generic ballad. 5 minutes. The clock was ticking. My eyes scanned the room, no longer as a victim, but as a strategist assessing the field. The board was set. The pieces were in new strategic positions. Marcus was no longer at our table. I spotted him across the room near the main podium where the MC was stationed. He was not talking to the MC. He was in a quiet, serious conversation with the venue owner, a portly man in a tuxedo whose name tag read Mr. Holloway. Holloway was listening intently to Marcus, his head nodding, his expression one of sharp, sudden concern. Marcus was not asking. He was informing. He was, I realized, securing the platform. He was making sure that when the MC stepped away, the microphone would be live. My gaze shifted. The board chair was no longer at the bar. He had returned to table 2, my table, and was slumped in his chair, his face a sickly, sweaty gray. He was trying to drain the last of a glass of whiskey, but his hand was shaking. He was not alone. Mrs. Eleanor Pierce was standing near him, not at his side, not speaking to him, but a few feet away. Her arms crossed, her navy silk dress a column of pure cold judgment. She was just watching him. Her gaze was not one of anger. It was an interrogating gaze, the look of a CEO assessing a catastrophic financial report. She was calculating. She was measuring the depth of the liability she had just married her son into. The board chair could feel her stare. He wouldn't look up, his guilt a visible, crushing weight. I saw the board chair's son, standing alone by the 7-tiered cake, an untouched monument to a lie. His face was pale, his posture rigid. The cracks had become a total fracture. Regina, having fled the hallway after me, was now approaching him, her hands out, her face a mask of desperate, pleading reassurance. He didn't move. He didn't reach for her. He just stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, watching her come toward him with the dead, exhausted eyes of a man who had just realized the full catastrophic extent of his mistake. His support, her primary shield, was gone. I walked toward table 2, my place setting, now a public glaring beacon of the board's correction. As I approached, Elaine saw me. She had been sitting there, twisting her napkin into shreds. But now she stood up, her movement so abrupt it knocked her chair back. Her eyes, red and swollen, met mine. The aunts and uncles at the table fell silent, their spoons clattering against their dessert plates. "Lila," she said. Her voice was not the whisper from the terrace. It was clear, raw, and carried across the table. "Lila, I need to say this in front of our neighbors." She gestured to the surrounding, gawking faces. "I want to apologize. What we allowed to happen to you tonight, the invitation, the seating, all of it." She took a ragged breath. "It was cruel and it was wrong. I was a coward and I am so sorry." It was a full public surrender. Aunt Beth's jaw dropped. Uncle Mark looked down at his plate. Elaine had just officially defected. She had chosen a side. She had chosen mine. I just looked at her, at this broken, belated act of courage. I gave a single slow nod. It was an acknowledgement, not a forgiveness. But for her, it was absolution. Regina saw it from across the room. She saw her final, most important ally, our board member, publicly capitulate. She saw the shift, the last foundation stone of her world crumbling. The sight of her board member apologizing to me publicly was more than she could bear. She abandoned her husband. She ran. She stumbled across the dance floor, her white dress snagging on a chair, and she grabbed my arm. Her grip was no longer the angry claw-like grip from the hallway. It was the desperate, frantic, climbing grip of a person who is drowning. "No," she whispered, her voice a reedy, terrified plea. "No, Elaine. Stop. Lila. Please." She looked at me, her eyes wild, the last vestiges of her pride dissolving. "A few more pictures, please. We have to, just one more. A nice one for the album for the board. Please, neighbor." Her voice had changed. The command was gone. The venom was gone. It was just pleading. She needed to manufacture the evidence. She needed one picture of a happy community to paste over the gaping smoking crater of the evening. She was begging me to help her rebuild the lie. The remaining guests in our vicinity were watching this transfixed. This was the final pathetic unraveling. I looked at her hand on my arm. This hand that had co-signed the theft of my future. I gently but firmly unhooked her fingers and stepped back. I had created a boundary, a physical space of clean air. One shot was enough. "Regina," I said. My voice was quiet, not unkind, just final. The crowd around us saw it. They saw her cling. They saw me refuse. They saw her for the first time completely and utterly powerless. But, she stammered, her hand hovering in the air, lost. The videographer, sensing the end, drifted over, his camera light on. He no longer saw Regina as the star. He saw me as the center of the story. "Miss Voss, Lila?" he asked, his voice respectful. "We're just getting some final thoughts from the board before the night ends. Would you like to say a few words? Maybe a favorite community memory with Regina? Something happy to put in the video." He was offering me a branch, a chance to be the magnanimous one, the bigger person. He was offering me a chance to help Regina, to provide a single healing soundbite that could paper over the night's trauma. I looked at him. I looked at the red recording light, the same light that had just 10 minutes ago captured the gleaming, damning evidence on the wine cellar wall. A small serene smile touched my lips. "Thank you," I said to him, my voice warm. "I think I will have something to say." He brightened, raising the camera to his shoulder. "Great, whenever you're ready." I held up one hand, a gentle, polite stop. "When it's my turn," I said. He looked confused, but lowered the camera. In my clutch, my phone vibrated. A single sharp pulse. I didn't need to look. I already knew. I slipped my hand into the clutch, my fingers brushing the cool, sharp edge of the cream envelope. I slid the phone out. One new message from Marcus. Contained a single word. "Now." As if the message itself was a cue. The slow saccharine ballad that had been playing came to a premature, scratching halt. The room fell into a confused silence. The MC's voice came over the speakers, but it was no longer the party hype voice. It was the formal, authoritative voice of the venue itself. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. As we conclude our celebration this evening, we have one final very special presentation. Please direct your attention to the podium." The music died completely. The ambient warm pink and purple lights that had lit the room faded to black. The entire massive reception hall was plunged into darkness, save for the thousands of tiny twinkling fairy lights in the rafters, which now looked like a cold, distant galaxy of stars. Then a single, sharp, intensely white spotlight cut through the blackness. It didn't land on the dance floor. It didn't land on the head table. It landed on the empty podium, illuminating the microphone, waiting. My heart was not racing. It was not pounding. It was a slow, heavy, steady drum. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of an engine engaging, of a final sequence initiating. I stepped away from Regina. I stepped away from Elaine. I began to walk toward the light. My heels made the only sound in the vast, silent darkness, a soft, rhythmic, deliberate click-clack on the marble floor. Each step was a drumbeat counting down the final seconds of the board's carefully constructed lie. The 1,000 fairy lights above were cold stars in a black sky. The single brilliant white spotlight on the podium was a destination, a stage, an operating theater. Mr. Holloway, the venue owner, was standing there holding the microphone. He looked flustered, as if he'd been given a last-minute urgent change to the script. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Before our final song, we at Pinecrest Estates wish to extend a profound thank you to those whose generosity makes nights like this possible." He paused, clearing his throat. "In 2020, a significant restoration of our historic wine cellar was undertaken. This was made possible by a truly wonderful gift of foundational support. So, we would like to invite to the stage the trustee of that fund, a man whose family has been a pillar of the Pinecrest Valley community for generations, Mr. Board Chair." A smattering of confused, hesitant applause rippled through the darkness. The spotlight swung from the podium, sweeping across the room until it found the board chair at table 2. Pinned him there, a bug in a beam of light. He stood. He tried to straighten his tie, but his hands fumbled. He pasted a weak, waxy smile on his face and began the long, lonely walk from his table to the stage. His steps were heavy, shuffling, as he reached the podium and took the microphone from Mr. Holloway. His eyes adjusted to the glare, and he saw me. I was standing just to the side of the stage, out of the direct beam, but close enough to be clearly visible. I was not alone. Beside me stood Mrs. Annabelle Whitlow, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of cold, neutral observation, and in my hand, held loosely at my side, was the cream-colored envelope. I had my thumb tucked under the flap, holding it slightly, tantalizingly open. His smile faltered. The color, already faint, drained completely from his face. Then his eyes flickered upward past me to the large projection screens on either side of the stage. The screens that had all night been showing a live feed of the happy couple and a slideshow of their engagement photos. The slideshow was gone. Now on both massive screens in high definition was a still image. The image the videographer had captured just minutes before. The gleaming polished copper plaque from the wine cellar and the signatures blown up to the size of a man's head for all 200 guests to see. Board Chair, Trustee. Regina Caldwell, Project Liaison. He stopped. He froze completely, his hand gripping the microphone stand, his knuckles white. He was staring at his own signature, a monument to his crime, broadcast for the entire world to see. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I took one step out of the shadows and into the edge of the spotlight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The microphone picked up my every word, calm and clear. "Before the board chair accepts this thank you," I said, my voice resonating through the silent hall, "I think it's important for everyone to understand the true nature of the Pinecrest Community Heritage Fund he represents." I reached into the envelope. "This," I said, pulling out the first document, "is the original charter of the fund established by my predecessor, Lucille, in 2018. The image on the screen behind the board chair changed. The plaque vanished, replaced by a crystal-clear scan of my predecessor's handwritten note. The videographer, clearly now acting under Marcus's direction, zoomed in, the camera's focus sharp and unforgiving, her elegant, Shaky script filled the screen. The fund's entire purpose is to ensure a fair and equal opportunity for all residents. A low, shocked murmur swept through the room. And this, I continued, pulling the second document from the envelope, is the 2020 amendment to that charter filed just weeks before the deposit was paid for this very venue. The image on the screen changed again. Now it showed the amended clause. It showed the angry red line slashed through my grant. It zoomed in on the board chair's handwriting in the margin. Temp transfer to primary account for RC's pre-gala allocations. The murmur in the room died. The silence that replaced it was absolute, a crushing weight. I saw Elaine's hands fly to her mouth. An amendment, I said, my voice still perfectly even. That is missing the legally required notarized signature of the estate's original executive. An amendment that was therefore never legally valid. At that moment, a new voice cut through the silence. It was not mine. It was the crisp, authoritative, gin-dry voice of Annabelle Whitlow. She took a single step forward into the light beside me. As the director of the Silverline Fund, she said, her voice carrying an authority that dwarfed everyone else's, I can state for the record that the bylaws governing every community trust and philanthropic fund in this valley are unequivocal. The reallocation of designated ring-fenced educational grants for personal expenses such as a gala is not permitted. It is a gross violation of fiduciary duty. The room was a vacuum. I saw the board chair's son standing by the cake stare at Regina with an expression of utter hollowed-out horror. I saw Regina, her face a white skeletal mask, turn her gaze from her husband to the board chair, a silent, panicked, desperate appeal. And I saw the board chair. His eyes locked on me. I did not glare. I did not smile. I simply held his gaze. I was not there to accuse him. I was there to correct the record. I came here tonight to celebrate a community, I said. My final words addressed not to the room, but to him. And I wish my president all the happiness she deserves. The echo of my earlier toast hung in the air, now imbued with a terrible new weight. But the truth, which was taken from its proper place, must now be returned to it. I slid the documents back into the cream-colored envelope. The board chair's eyes followed the movement. They were no longer seeing me. They were locked on the envelope, on the flap, which was still slightly ajar. He could see the corner of the document inside. He could see the raised, embossed circular stamp of the notary public who had certified my predecessor's original will. He could see the seal of the law firm. He knew. He knew this wasn't just a neighborhood story. This was evidence. His hand, which had been gripping the microphone stand, lost its strength. His finger slipped. The microphone, heavy and black, fell from its clip. It hit the wooden podium with a loud hollow thump, then clattered to the floor, the speaker shrieking with a final, agonizing burst of feedback that ripped through the silent hall. His hand was shaking, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. His mouth hung open. His eyes were wide with a primal animal terror. The single white spotlight still held us both. My board chair broken and exposed on the stage and me standing just below, the truth resting quietly in my hand. The entire room, 200 guests, held their breath, waiting for the world to break. The curtain fell. Thank you so much for listening to the story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So, drop a comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. And to help this story reach even more people who need to hear it, please hit that hype button to let the algorithm know you're here.